The rain fell in relentless sheets. Each drop struck the cobblestones of the narrow alley with a hollow, echoing sound. The alley ran beside the old church, its spire cutting sharply into the night sky. Windows were dark, and shutters rattled with each gust of wind. No light came from inside, yet the faint smell of burning wax lingered. Marcus stepped cautiously onto the wet stones. His boots slipped slightly, and he caught himself on the cold, damp wall. A shiver ran down his spine, though the night was not cold. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity pushed him forward. The alley narrowed. Shadows clung to the walls like living creatures. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper moved through the air. Marcus stopped, straining to hear. It sounded like a voice, but not any voice he recognized. It called his name in a low, trembling tone. His heart pounded. The street lamp at the entrance flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. The church doors loomed ahead, black and silent, but their wood seemed to breathe. He took a step forward. A sudden chill wrapped around him, heavier than the damp air. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him, though no one followed. Marcus spun around. The alley was empty. The walls seemed closer, pressing in. A faint light glowed from a cracked window of the church. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. The air smelled of incense and something metallic, like iron. A shadow moved across the window. It was not human. It twisted and stretched, impossible angles bending as it passed. Marcus froze, unable to look away. A sudden screech filled the alley. It came from the church, sharp and piercing. Every hair on his body stood on end. The whisper returned, louder this time. It was not his name, but a warning he did not understand. Marcus's foot caught on a broken stone. He stumbled forward and almost fell. Something cold brushed his hand against the wall. It was not stone. It moved, slimy and warm, leaving a faint trail of moisture. His stomach churned. A door at the side of the church creaked open. No wind touched it, yet it swung slowly, beckoning him inside. A light spilled out, pale and greenish. He saw shapes in the light, crouching, waiting. The alley seemed to stretch farther than it should. Steps he had taken now felt like miles. The whisper grew into a chant, layered voices speaking in a language he could not understand. The walls pulsed with life, as if breathing in time with him. Marcus wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The shapes moved closer. They were not fully formed, yet their eyes glowed with a terrible awareness. The smell of iron was overpowering now. Every instinct in his body screamed that he must run, but his legs refused to obey. The light from the church window flared suddenly, blinding him. When he could see again, the alley had changed. The walls were no longer brick, but carved faces frozen in silent screams. Some faces twisted, watching him with accusing eyes. The whispering became laughter, hollow and cruel. A hand, pale and long, reached from the darkness of the alley and grazed his shoulder. Marcus spun, but found only empty space. The alley was closing in, narrowing with every heartbeat. The chanting was deafening now, vibrating through the stone beneath his feet. He stumbled, fell to his knees. The wet stones clung to him like living things. A shadow rose from the ground, taller than any man. Its shape shifted constantly, impossible to define. It leaned toward him, and he could feel its gaze burrowing into his mind. Marcus tried to speak. Words failed him. The laughter and chanting reached a single, piercing note. The walls of the alley vibrated, groaning as if the entire structure were alive. Marcus's vision blurred, and the world spun around him. The shadow lunged forward. It did not touch him, but he felt every inch of its presence. A voice spoke directly inside his head. It whispered secrets he was not meant to know. His mind reeled. Pain and fear tore through him. The light from the church window flickered once, twice, and then went out. The alley was silent, but not empty. Marcus was certain the shadows were still watching. He stood trembling, unable to move. The ground beneath him seemed to pulse. A faint heartbeat echoed, growing louder. The shapes in the darkness moved closer again. He felt the cold press of unseen fingers along his spine. The church door slammed shut behind him with a sound like a tomb ceiling. A low, growling whisper spoke. It said only one word. Marcus knew, with sudden clarity, that no one who entered this alley ever returned the same. Marcus's legs shook uncontrollably. The shadows around him twisted and shifted, as if the alley itself were alive. Each wall pulsed with a rhythm that matched the strange heartbeat beneath his feet. The air thickened, tasting of whetstone and iron, choking him with every breath. He wanted to run, yet every step forward felt like wading through thick, invisible sludge. The darkness was not empty, it moved, wrapping around him, pressing closer with every heartbeat. A single lantern flickered at the far end of the alley. Its light was weak, sickly yellow, but it drew Marcus forward as if it were a lifeline. The whispering grew louder, insistent, wrapping around his mind. It spoke in words he could not understand, yet the meaning was clear. It was a warning, a demand, a memory of horrors long buried. Marcus's throat tightened. He tried to scream, but only a strangled gasp escaped. The shapes in the shadows shifted again, taller now, their forms stretching toward him. He could see eyes glinting, red, green, and white, unblinking and cold. They watched him, measuring him, waiting. He felt their attention like a weight pressing into his chest, making every breath a struggle. The church tower loomed overhead, silent and menacing, its bells unmoving yet somehow ringing in his ears. Marcus realized he could no longer tell where the alley ended and the church began. The world around him had changed. The ground quivered beneath him. He fell to his hands and knees, mud and water mixing with the filth of the alley. The heartbeat grew louder, faster, as if it were reaching a climax. The chanting returned, louder than before, 1,000 voices speaking at once. Marcus's mind screamed for escape, yet his body refused to respond. Something cold and wet wrapped around his ankle, pulling him backward. He kicked and thrashed, but the force was stronger than him. A pale, skeletal hand shot from the darkness and grabbed his wrist. The grip was firm, inhumanely strong. Marcus tried to pull away, but the fingers dug into his skin like ice-cold iron. The shadows surged closer, taller and more defined, writhing like living smoke. Whispers turned into harsh laughter, echoing off the alley walls, echoing inside his skull. He realized with terror that he was not alone, not by a long shot. The lantern ahead flickered violently and then exploded into light. Marcus was blinded for a moment, shielding his eyes. When he looked again, the alley had transformed entirely. The cobblestones were cracked, blackened, as though centuries had passed in an instant. The walls were carved with grotesque faces, mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow yet watching. The church doors hung open, revealing nothing but darkness within. Yet from that darkness came a soft, rhythmic breathing, slow and heavy, as if something massive waited inside. Marcus forced himself to stand, trembling. The hand on his wrist remained, unyielding. He took one step toward the church. The whispering intensified, becoming a roar that battered his mind. It was speaking in countless voices now, overlapping and indistinct, yet each word seared into his consciousness. It was the history of the alley, of the church, of every soul who had vanished here. And now, Marcus understood, he was part of that history. The ground beneath him shifted suddenly. A crack opened at his feet, glowing with a deep red light. Heat rose, burning his hands and knees as if the earth itself were alive and hungry. The skeletal hand tightened its grip, pulling him toward the crack. Marcus screamed, finally finding his voice, but the sound was drowned by the roar of the shadows. Figures emerged from the alley walls, their forms shifting between human and something else entirely. They reached for him with long, clawed hands. Their eyes glowed like embers, burning through the darkness. Marcus stumbled backward, slipping in the mud. The church doors loomed closer, impossibly tall and wide, swinging open as if inviting him to step inside. The whispering was now a single voice, soft but impossible to ignore. It said, clearly, in a language he somehow understood, "Do not enter." He knew it was too late. The alley twisted around him. No matter which way he turned, he saw only the church doors and the writhing shadows. The heartbeat beneath his feet grew deafening, vibrating through every bone in his body. Something cold brushed the back of his neck, raising goosebumps and fear in equal measure. The skeletal hand pulled harder, dragging him forward toward the darkness. Marcus clawed at the ground, desperately trying to resist. A sharp, piercing shriek split the air. It came from inside the church. The shadows recoiled for a moment, hissing and shivering. A faint figure appeared in the doorway, tall, cloaked in black, face hidden. It held out a hand, pale and long-fingered, beckoning him. Marcus's mind screamed for him to run, yet his body froze. He was caught between the lure of the figure and the pressing horror of the shadows. The heartbeat slowed, leaving a void of silence so intense that his own blood seemed deafening. Marcus took a trembling step forward. The shadows surged, trying to pull him back, claws scraping his skin. The figure remained calm, unmoving, its presence both terrifying and strangely comforting. He could hear whispers from inside the church, countless voices calling his name, recounting every sin, every fear, every secret he had buried deep. The air was thick, suffocating, yet he could not resist. One step, and then another, until he was finally at the threshold of the church. The figure reached out, and Marcus felt a cold touch on his shoulder. The shadows fell silent instantly, freezing in place. The whispers vanished. The alley was still. Marcus turned to look back, and the alley behind him had disappeared entirely. There was no rain, no walls, no cobblestones, only the dark, empty space of the church interior. The figure spoke, its voice calm, echoing. "Once you enter, you will never leave. There is no return." Marcus realized then that he had been lured, not by curiosity alone, but by something older, something that had waited for him for a long time. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and stepped fully into the church. The doors slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the walls. The shadows reformed inside, twisting around him, yet unable to reach him. The figure vanished into the darkness, leaving Marcus alone with the ancient air of the church. The candles flickered to life on their own, revealing walls carved with grotesque faces, their mouths open in silent screams. The heartbeat returned, slower this time, steady and oppressive. Marcus understood that the alley had not been a place. It had been a test. And the church was the answer. Marcus's eyes adjusted to the dim light of the candles. The walls were covered in carvings of faces, each frozen in expressions of fear, anger, or sorrow. Some eyes seemed to follow him as he moved, unblinking and alive. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of old incense and something coppery, like blood. His heart pounded, yet he could not tear his gaze away. A low, whispering chant began again, soft at first, then growing louder. The shadows in the corners twisted and shifted, as if testing him, observing him. Marcus realized they were waiting for something, his reaction, his fear, his resolve. He forced himself to breathe deeply, steadying his shaking hands. The figure he had seen at the door appeared again, but this time, it did not beckon. It stood silently, watching. Marcus stepped carefully across the cold stone floor. He noticed a narrow staircase leading upward, a faint glow spilling from its top. Something deep inside told him it was the only way forward, the only chance to escape the alley's curse. With a trembling hand, he grasped the railing and began to climb. The shadows stretched toward him, clawing, hissing, but they did not touch him. Each step felt like moving through thick syrup, but he pushed forward. At the top of the stairs, a heavy wooden door awaited. Marcus pressed against it, and it swung open with an ancient creak. A fresh breeze swept through, carrying the scent of rain and night air. He stepped out into the quiet streets, the church alley behind him now empty and normal. No shadows moved, no whispers lingered. It was as if the alley had never existed. Marcus paused, heart racing, and glanced back. The church stood silently, the door closed, its spire piercing the night sky. He felt a chill, a lingering presence that would never truly leave him. He had escaped, but the memory of the alley, the shadows, and the chanting would remain forever. The air felt lighter, yet every instinct told him to keep moving, to never look back. As he walked away, the streets were empty and silent, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. Marcus understood that some places were not meant to be explored, some mysteries not meant to be unraveled. The alley had taken what it wanted, fear, curiosity, perhaps even a part of his soul. He did not speak, and he did not return. The church alley remained, waiting, silent, a hidden trap in the heart of the city. No one who entered would ever forget, and Marcus knew he would carry the memory for the rest of his life. The alley had tested him, and he had survived, but survival came at a cost. A cost measured in sleepless nights, in whispers that crept into his dreams, in shadows that waited in the corners of his vision. He stepped into the night, free but forever changed, carrying with him the knowledge that some mysteries are better left untouched. The city slept around him, unaware of the terror hidden in the narrow alley beside the old church. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, the alley waited. Quiet, patient, eternal.